Today, we are diving into a crisis that just pushed the Middle East to the absolute brink of all-out war. We're going to break down how it happened and why the next 24 hours could decide everything.
So get this. Just last night, Iran was apparently on the verge of launching a massive military strike against Israel. And we're not talking about some small-scale skirmish. This was a move that would have completely shattered the peace process. It was called off, literally, at the last second.
So what stopped them? Well, it came down to some seriously intense, high-stakes diplomacy. Our sources say a coalition of nations, we're talking Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, made this powerful, direct appeal to Iran's leaders. The message was simple: show strategic patience, hold back, give the peace talks a chance to actually work. Okay, so a huge attack was stopped by a threat, but the tensions that almost caused it, they're still boiling right under the surface. And that brings us to the real heart of what we're talking about today. What pushed the region to this cliff edge? And more importantly, could it all happen again?
The fuse for this entire crisis, it seems, was lit in Lebanon. To really understand why Iran was reportedly ready to launch missiles, we have to look at the devastating military action that was unfolding there, right in the middle of what was supposed to be a period of peace.
You know, for a second there, it really looked like peace might actually have a shot. A ceasefire was hammered out, brokered by the US and Iran, and it promised a 2-week pause. And after more than 40 days of fighting, it felt like the entire region could finally take a breath. But that hope? It was just completely shattered. Almost as soon as the ceasefire was announced, Israel reportedly launched one of the most intense bombardments of the conflict on Lebanon. Sources claim that in a single day, more than 250 civilians were killed. The World Health Organization even warned that hospitals there are about to totally collapse. And this is where things get really complicated, because it exposed this huge contradiction. The original deal, which the US, Iran, and Pakistan had backed, specifically said Lebanon was part of the ceasefire. But Israel immediately came out and said, nope, we are not a party to any deal involving Lebanon. And then, in a really critical move, the US seemed to flip its position to align with Israel. And believe me, the world noticed. Major world leaders, like the UK's Keir Starmer and France's Emmanuel Macron, said Israel was crossing red lines. The UN condemned the attacks. The international alarm bells were ringing loud and clear. See, the violence in Lebanon wasn't just a tragedy on its own. It was a direct threat to the only path to peace. It basically put the incredibly important talks between the US and Iran on life support. I mean, this was supposed to be the big moment. A face-to-face meeting in Islamabad, American and Iranian delegations sitting across from each other. The whole point was to take this temporary ceasefire and turn it into a real, lasting, 10-point peace plan. Literally everything was riding on these talks. And this timeline just shows you how fast it all went south. Day 1, you've got hope, a plan for direct talks. Day 2, chaos, as the attacks in Lebanon just throw a wrench in everything. And then, by day 3, you get this really worrying sign. Iran's ambassador to Pakistan tweets that his team is coming and then deletes it. That one action sent a shockwave of fear that Iran was backing out completely. So with diplomacy basically on life support, the talk on the ground got really, really dangerous. Those calls for strategic patience were suddenly being drowned out by some very direct threats of war. And I want you to hear this, a direct quote from Iran's president. There's no trying to read between the lines here. He's saying, flat out, that Iran's military is ready and that one more provocation, like the attacks in Lebanon, would trigger a direct missile attack on Israel, no matter what it meant for the peace process. And if that wasn't clear enough, this warning came from General Ismail Qani, who commands Iran's elite Quds force. Now, this is significant because he'd been silent for 40 days, and he broke that silence with this ominous promise of a harsh and regret-inducing punishment. The message couldn't be clearer. Patience was running out. So this brings us to the really big question here. Why is this so hard to solve? Why does it feel like every single step towards peace is met with another lunge towards war? Well, the sources point to some really deep, fundamental roadblocks. Now, one of the most explosive claims coming from the source material is this idea of strategic sabotage. The allegation is that the escalation in Lebanon wasn't some kind of accident or miscalculation. It was a deliberate strategy by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to completely wreck the US-Iran talks, which he apparently sees as a threat to Israel's very existence. So let's just connect the dots here. You have a prime minister who reportedly sees the main peace effort as a danger. You have the flat-out refusal to include Lebanon and Gaza, which makes a real ceasefire pretty much impossible. Then you have analysts saying the U.S. president might not be able to restrain his ally because of political pressures at home. And to top it all off, you have officials in Israel who reportedly think the whole thing is going to collapse in a matter of days anyway. It's like a perfect storm for failure.
And that leaves us right back where we started, staring over the edge. The path to diplomacy is crumbling, while the path to war is armed and ready. The appeal was for strategic patience, but the warning from military leaders is for punishment. The question now is, which one will it be?